Hi, everyone. Welcome to our second bi-weekly TCG Global Insights panel. I see that a lot of people are still joining, so I'm going to wait about 2 minutes and then we'll begin. So feel free to grab a cup of coffee, get settled, and then we'll get started. All right, for those who are joining, we're going to get started in about 1 minute, just letting some people join. We get quite a few jumping on right now. Okay, looks like we're settling in with our people jumping in, so I'll get started. Welcome to our second bi-weekly TCG Global Insights panel. I'm Christy Harner, the Chief Marketing Officer of TCG Consulting. From all of us at TCG, we want to thank you for being here today and thank those who sent in questions both during the last panel as well as over the past week to help us bring relevant topics to the table today and to guide our future sessions. If you have any additional questions you'd like our panelists to answer today at the, if we have time at the end, please send them via the chat system on GoToMeeting. And we will also send you a link later to submit questions for next time. We want to make sure every panel is relevant and is answering the questions that you might have. This recording will also be available after the session so you can share it with others. Today, we'll be speaking about managing a travel meetings payment and expense program without travelers during COVID-19. Our host today is Albert Terrace, the president and founder of TCG Consulting. So I'll let him take it from here.
Thank you, Christy. So good day, everyone. I'm Albert Terrace. I'm the moderator for these Global Insight sessions. I want to thank you and also thank those who've worked tirelessly to put these sessions together so quickly, dictated by what we're dealing with today. We'll continue to make these sessions possible, and for those who are participating, including these panelists, I'm indebted to you for volunteering your time and insight that'll clearly help everyone who's here. So real quickly, last night and in preparation for today's session, I listened to the April 1st series event again. I went through the video and heard it, went through the 45-minute session, right? For those of you who were able to attend, I hope that you were equally as impressed and were able to take away and use some of the insight provided by that expert panel. That was out of the world all-star group of talent who lended their time, and Jamie Stapleman and Aiken Hinacho, Bruce Miller, and Brett Leslie. I want to thank you again for your contribution and really setting the bar. You guys were amazing. For this panel, right, we've got our work cut out for us. The other people set an expectation that I'm confident this group will bring and maintain. And so for those who don't know it, I know each one of you personally, and some of you have become real friends in a long career. And for those who don't know it, I added up the years, but collectively this group on this panel represent well over 118 years of travel management. And in some ways, your careers and your experience helped you prepare for something that I expect none of us would have ever wanted. That was Sullenberg landing a plane on a river. He had trained for it, but never thought that would happen. And in some ways, your careers and the work and experience you were able to deploy, and the entire organization paused and looked at you to make sure their people and their assets were safe. And that's why I've asked you to come together. I wish this was a round table and we're sitting across from each other. So my two Dougs, as they got to be introduced to Mark, know that Mark has an amazing wine cellar, and the preference would have been to sit in Switzerland and have him open a bottle and have a discussion about what did we learn. And so instead, we're going to use this open session with a large group of people who are listening and counting and using your expertise and what you've went through. And I'm certainly sure that we'll deliver on that. Today's theme, as Christy introduced, is managing travel, meetings, payment, expense without travelers, right? They're not necessarily interchangeable or synonymous. Programs and things still run. We learned that last week very clearly. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have people on trips. In fact, we know we do, and we've got to care for them while doing other aspects that are peripheral to managing TMPE. I'd like to remind everyone to feel free to submit questions during this session. I'll be managing those questions, and as we go through the questions that we have today, I'll try and weave them in as I see them into the panelists' responses, or let them know of a question that's come up. If we have time at the end, we'll bring those up as one-offs and we'll kind of move through those real quickly. I'll also remind you that today is our second session, and the first one was April 1st, today the 15th. We're running our third session on April 29th, and I'm looking at my calendar, which is a reminder, on May 13th and again May 27th. Our goal is to have themed and relevant based on the input that we have directly from the audience who's here. So we very much welcome your recommendations for future panelists, themes, or questions that can be addressed by this group. And so with that, I'd like to have my panelists please introduce themselves. If I could, please, Doug DeBalso, if you would introduce yourself to the group.
Thanks, Albert. So my name is Doug DeBalso. I know many of you. I recently started in January as indirect procurement manager for Master Builder Solutions, which is a division of BASF that BASF is in the process of spinning off. So it's kind of been an interesting sort of double whammy with the coronavirus issues and so forth, with both essentially standing up a brand new indirect procurement program, including travel, card, and expense, and being with the new organization that's that's going through these travel disruptions and so forth. So I very much look forward to speaking with everyone today, and I'm honored to be a part of this panel. And this is usually, they ask me to dress how I normally would in my home office, and so I just want everyone to know that has never seen me another way. This is who I am.
24/7, right? Thank you, Doug. I appreciate it. Mark Zuber from Switzerland, please, introductions.
Thank you, Albert. So good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Mark Zuber. I'm the Global Travel Category Lead at Nestlé. As you might know, Nestlé is the #1 nutrition, health, and wellness company of this world. So we are very much in the midst of this crisis, very actively engaged in supplying all markets of the necessary products that they need as people go out and shop groceries like hell. Definitely a major challenge from a supply chain standpoint, and this is also good learning that we translate into the travel category, which I manage. I've been doing this job now for 10 years, and as Albert highlighted, there are so many things that just transformed ourselves. We were never prepared for what we're living right now, but I think, and we'll probably have the opportunity of discussing some of that during this panel discussion, it is really also a way of transforming the way this category is going to be managed in the future. So while there are challenges out there, we also see many, many opportunities going forward to making this just a better way of managing the category in the future.
Thank you very much, Mark. And Mark's background prior to direct travel category was in finance and global finance and country finance as well. So his perspective from a finance is clearly one of the advantages we want to take advantage of today. So Doug Weeks lives in a place that everyone hopes to get to sometime. He just found it before other people did. And so Doug and I have known each other for many years. He's one of the icons in our industry, and he's based now in Charleston, South Carolina. Doug, if you could please to the group.
Yeah, Albert, appreciate it. And Doug and Mark, appreciate having the time with both of you today. I'm Doug Weeks. I'm the head of global travel at Ares Management. Not too many people are familiar, I don't think, with the Ares brand, but we're an alternative asset investment firm focused in three areas: private equity, credit, and commercial real estate. And so, our investment professionals are somewhat subdued right now with the current crisis and stay-at-home requirements, who are eager to get out there generating funds and revenue. But the firm's also looking at this as, as unfortunate as it might be, it's an opportunity for, investments to occur from an Ares perspective. So most of you have heard of Airbnb taking an infusion of $1 billion from another PE firm. I think those are the types of opportunities Ares is looking at during this crisis, albeit as hard as it may be, not being able to meet personally with a lot of potential clients and investors. So do appreciate the time. I am in Charleston. I wish I was on the golf course today, but like most places, they've closed most of the golf courses around here. The public beaches are closed, so it's Charleston's great, but this isn't the best time to be in Charleston because it's a little bit teasing, Albert.
Yeah, it is teasing, right? So we'll get there soon. We'll get together soon. So let's go at it, guys. Let's give everyone a great effort here. I know we will. And so we're going to talk about our agenda today: responsibilities then and now. Who are the new stakeholders, and how do we deliver value today when we're typically seen attached to people and trips and transactions? And so with that, Christy, let's jump to our first question, please. Again, I want to thank people who attended the previous session or in advance of this, sent us a whole list of questions that we went through and try to pick or synergize between different thoughts and try and get the lion's share, and if you can. So Doug DeBaltso, I'm going to tee you up if I could, please, right? So how are your responsibilities different today? And I know that's brand new, right? You're only in month 4 here of a new job, and you went right at it. How are they different today as a result of COVID versus previous COVID? And then right behind that, Mark, I'm going to come to you, and then Doug Weeks, if you want to start getting your answers ready. Doug?
Yeah, thank you, Albert. So I think from a travel, let's start out, I guess, from a pure travel perspective. Some of the key differences that BSF master builders are really how travel is approved up front compared to how it used to be. So I'm sure, not unlike many other organizations on this call today, we have some really stringent pre-trip approval processes in place. Of course, international travel, from the U.S. or from North America point of sale has pretty much been curtailed. But even domestically, all air travel now, we require sea-level approval, and which is obviously a pretty high bar. Most of our business, interestingly enough, has remained strong, and we're seeing some signs of slowdown, obviously, as companies cut back or begin to plan to cut back on their capital expenditures. But we are an organization that supplies construction chemicals, so essentially additives to a lot of the building materials you're familiar with, the various kinds of concretes and aggregates and so forth. And so, we still have lots of people out there traveling, but a lot of that travel is ground transportation, is our technicians, visiting the job sites and so forth. And so from a travel perspective, air travel, that's one thing. We require sea-level approval now for air travel. But interestingly enough, we've had to relax and have relaxed a lot of our card purchasing policy restrictions. So, our P cards, our T&E cards, we've made some changes to allow people in the field who don't have access to an office, perhaps, where they did before, to be able to purchase more of the goods and services they need, either via their P card or even their T&E card. So we've done a lot around, raising limits, and of course that's a dangerous precedent long term, but in terms of short-term needs and business continuity, have had a lot of activity in that space. We're even considering, depending on how long this lasts, relaxing some of the the merchant code restrictions and what the individuals can buy on those cards. So, more to be determined, but those are probably the two biggest changes in our business.
So Mark, we use a Nestle product most preferably when we want to, but even when we don't know, right? You're all over my house, and my kids certainly know it, but it's not only for kids. You guys are a vital part of sustaining our life and well-being in the short term. Tell us what looks different from your perspective and your responsibilities, day before and then shut down across Switzerland and across the world.
Absolutely. So I would start by saying, well, actually, there has not been a major change in the responsibilities that I have. The reason is the fundamentals are still valid. We're here basically to provide the right processes and make sure that these work from an end-to-end perspective, but also that our suppliers, whether these are, the TMC or, the card providers, or, of course, the airlines or hotels that we still use sporadically, are actually delivering their services. So I think the first very important point is that we still, are doing our core jobs and we focus on this, ensuring that it delivers up to expectations. Having said that, we definitely also shifted the focal point on some of the activities that we were doing in the past, and now we are putting these in the limelight. The first one is risk management. We definitely have a much better and much bigger role in managing risks, whether these are the people risks, and we heard Doug talk also about trip authorization and ensuring that sea level approves of whatever gets out there. That is certainly an area that we've been very much focusing on right now and securing the processes around that. The other key element is the financial risk, understanding also what risk exposure, financial risk exposure we have and how we want to mitigate this so that everybody at least has an understanding of what might come and how to deal with this. Related to that, BCP, business continuity planning, has also taken over a big part of our time and responsibilities. It's really ensuring that as we operate across 150 countries, and just from a travel standpoint, I have more than 70 countries for which we provide travel services, that for each and every one of these countries, there are processes and business continuity plans that allow us to continue fulfilling the minimal travel-related services that are required, again, within an appropriate risk environment. It also implies that we're changing our priorities. We were working on a number of projects, and now we, of course, have to shift back and look at different projects because not only do we require these to be more focal, but also sometimes we're now seeing that resources that we had at our disposal are not there anymore. So the whole, reprioritization of activities is another area that we've changed. This also implies that processes have to be revamped. So we're working spending quite significant time with our TMC, for instance, in ensuring they have the right processes in place to support the new activities, such, of course, managing, for instance, all these refunds and now the vouchers that the airlines are putting out in the marketplace. We have to ensure that this is controlled and that we have clear visibility on that. So these process revamping are definitely areas that we're focusing on. Related to this, we also spend a lot of time now creating the adequate reports, the visibility of travel, even if we see that we are actually not traveling, but I mean, what we have in the pipeline, we're getting much more visibility than ever before. Whether that is from a duty of care standpoint, whether that is from a financial standpoint, that is certainly something that we have invested much more time than ever before. And the final point, but also very critical, is the communication part. We have around 70,000 people to whom we need to communicate how they need to travel, what they need to do, and how they need to do this. And of course, the current situation has also implied they need to change some of their habits and some of their knowledge to make sure that if they actually need to travel, they travel in a safe and in a safe way. So we and also, you know, about how to deal with trips that are already planned and they need to cancel. So a lot of time is invested in communicating and reassuring also travelers so that this it continues being a seamless exercise as far as we can, at least.
That's a great and comprehensive answer. It's a lot of puzzle pieces. I think the big takeaway there is you're doing what you always did, and now you have more, right? And it's different. Doug, and tell us about yours, you know, day before and day after.
Yeah, so I think the biggest change for us is, you know, we've never, unlike Doug DeBalso, we never had any pre-trip approval process, which we do now. And, you know, beyond just putting that in place during the current crisis, it's, you know, looking at evaluating that more on a forward basis, right? So, you know, do we want to have a pre-trip approval process, not from a cost standpoint, but from just a control and a security and a safety standpoint moving forward? You know, I think the big thing is travel professionals, we tend to live in the moment, and we're, you know, tend to at times be more reactive than proactive. And I think the big change for me and for us is now we've got, I don't want to say we've got more time, but we're really thinking more now about not reacting to the situation that we're all living through, and more looking at how do we, when we come out of this from a travel and a business standpoint, how are we going to act then? So I think, you know, we're going through that routine. You know, my day-to-day is working less with the, you know, the travelers and the suppliers today, given the limited volume, and it's more working with our BCP, our business continuity planning team. So HR and facilities and travel, we're all in this together, and it's all focused on how do we protect our assets, our employees, and whether that's changing our travel policies or whether that's changing our facilities policies. How are we looking at, you know, different meeting room configurations, promoting social distancing even when we return to work? You know, those are the things we're trying to think about right now even from a travel policy standpoint. How do we promote social distancing when we do start traveling again? What should we be telling our travelers? So it's a little bit of the unknown, Albert, but I would say that, you know, like Mark said, a day to day, it hasn't changed, but we're looking at different things and trying to leverage the opportunity to do so.
That's great insight. And if you see my head bending down here, I'm taking notes from this. I'm learning, and I want to make sure I summarize some key points and some threads that are going through. Christy, if we can, let's go to question number 2, please. So some of it you started answering here, right? I heard a whole bunch of stakeholders that are typically visible in travel and visibility, right? And so I'm going to start first with Mark Zuber. So who are some of the new stakeholders as a result of this that you're either meeting for the first time or now really want to give you the time? You're a key part of making them successful and you successful, and ultimately Nestle. Mark Zuber, please.
Yeah. Here again, I start with what we're leveraging on that existed. And 2 years ago, the group decided to put in what's a steering committee, an end-to-end steering committee. And that is now proving to be a huge enabler and huge success factor as we brought in the different functions that are also actively participating now in the management of this crisis. And when we talk functions, we actually put in the HR function that was not that visible. We group security functions that were also working silos. And of course, I mean, even the finance function in order to manage, I mean, all these expenses and all these claims and all these costs. The fact that we had this steering committee up and running really enabled us to ensure that even if the direct stakeholders that would do the work in background were not at the table, there was a link in there that would enable this communication to go through and then activate whichever actions had to take place and are taking place. So that is the first foremost big learning that we had, which enabled us to manage our stakeholders. Having said that, definitely the COVID crisis has also created other issue committees with whom we are now interacting. This doesn't mean that we need to be sitting on all these committees with, I mean, all the stakeholders there. I'll give you a typical example. So HR definitely is where the crisis is being managed. This is the head of HR and directly to the CEO, report to the CEO. They've got, of course, major stakeholders, including safety and health officials, experts, supply chain people. So while, I mean, global travel does not directly interact with them, we definitely have an open communication channel so that we know what decisions are taken there, and we can also feed back the consequences of what we're doing back to their organization. So that is a very important learning, with HR becoming much more a driver than ever before of our category. We were more finance-led, procurement-led than HR-led up to now. Having said that, we now own, specifically myself, I have a much higher level of entry and I would say airtime with our C-level. They're now, of course, expecting to have much more information coming from us than ever before. So we need to learn also how to communicate to these C-level people the relevant information, the condensed information. So C-level is certainly, I would say, while they existed in the past, they're now what they expect from us is much more details, much more, I mean, strategically, but I mean, precise information that they can act upon. I would end by saying what I mean came up also is what we call the ad hoc stakeholders. And here I'm talking about two types. The first one are travelers, rogue travelers that finally found out that actually they needed to have a corporate travel support organization to deal with some of their issues now. So suddenly these people are coming to us and saying, hey, I need your help. What can I do? So that's a very interesting learning, and we'll change some of our processes as a result of that. The second area that also came up are categories that were unmanaged. In our case, meeting and events is still very much at the local level and sometimes even decentralized at the local level. And these people are now coming to us also because they absolutely require expert support on how to deal with a specific situation. So I think, I mean, meeting organizers are for us new stakeholders that we did not really act with before. Last word is external stakeholders. We're also seeing, of course, that our suppliers are changing the way they address our accounts, or how they need to interact with us. And so we're having also many more interactions with some of the key suppliers at quite a senior level in order to define the next wave and way forward. So these are, I would say, also relatively new stakeholders for a certain number of suppliers.
Yeah, there's brilliant insight. I read a whole bunch of new stakeholders and titles and areas that I don't know we've all seen. Doug Weeks, you want to add on to what Mark started and what you're seeing?
Yeah, sure. And I'll be pretty brief on this one. I think the biggest change for a stakeholder for me has been our Chief Human Resources Officer. I have a weekly call with her now, talking about the impact to employees from a travel standpoint, but more broadly, thinking about policies like what do we do if we have travelers that, when work from stay-at-home orders by states or by governments are eliminated and somebody needs to travel for work, but they're still not comfortable. How do we handle those things from an HR standpoint? How do we handle it when we reopen our office in LA, when that state's orders are over and people can go back to work, but we have employees that, still don't feel safe? And so thinking about the human element of this and the impact of people psychologically and working through some of that with HR has been the biggest change for me.
It's huge, and that's real. Debald, so what have you learned in your short time here? How does it look and feel different?
Yeah. So really a couple things to supplement what Mark and Doug mentioned. The first one is just really the seat in our EHS department is really, more prominently kind of featured in our organization now than ever before. We're big on safety because of the kind of industry we're in, and every meeting starts with a safety briefing. Once or twice a week we'll receive safety bulletins from our safety director talking about real life situations that happened with our employees and what was done well or what could have been done to mitigate some potential issues. And so the first thing I'm seeing is this our safety director is taking a more and more prominent seat at the table, much like what Doug said when it comes to travel. Should we interact with with others? If so, what are those parameters? And I'll give you a really good example. This is kind of both travel and fleet related. Unfortunately, we had to terminate an employee recently for disciplinary purposes, and this employee had a company vehicle. And so in a normal scenario, our HR representative, this individual's manager, and perhaps someone from security would travel to the location, have a meeting with the person, make all the appropriate arrangements, have the discussion, documentation and so forth. Well, what do you do in a world where, you really shouldn't have that kind of, personal interaction? And so, we're finding that we're using more and more technology tools with the recommendation of our safety director, to accomplish those kinds of things. And it's, not as personal on one level as it could be or should be ideally in a perfect world. And I find myself using that term all the time. In a perfect world, this would happen or that would happen. But so we really accomplish that all via Microsoft Teams we happen to use. But that kind of leads me then to the next point, and that is, we're finding that our sales representatives are asking our IT department for more and more access to different kinds of tools. Some organizations have pretty stringent firewalls around, what kinds of video conferencing tools can be used. And I'm not going to, point out any one that's any better than another on this conversation, but if your organization happens to subscribe to WebEx, maybe you've blocked access to other kinds of tools. And so we're finding as our customers and prospects our sales representatives can't meet with customers and prospects, that they need more and more access to the different kinds of tools that those clients and prospects use. And so we've really seen increased activity at the IT level. Give me access to BlueJeans, give me access to Microsoft Teams, give me access to Zoom, give me access to Ring Central, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there has been that willingness. And again, all of this I think is situational. Some of it stays, in the future state as things return to normal. Some of it, just won't be able to because there will be a new normal. But I think a lot of those issues would have been unheard of or would have been, kind of immediately declined as something that's not best practice from a security standpoint. But our IT group has been starting to enable that functionality. I think you're going to find that's a challenge for the IT group going forward then to ensure all of those additional tools entering your environment, can indeed be conducted safely.
Love it. And so, Doug, you started addressing the question that I'm looking as they're coming across. One is how would we use automation more or less or technology? You just gave a couple real good instances, including broadening access to different applications so you can talk to people, not be blocked by firewalls or limitations. Christy, as we go to question number 3 for my panelists, I'm just going to watch time. We each have about 2 minutes on the next question, allow for any summary or questions or that. So think about that. We'll sharpen in, right? So how do we deliver value during the organization at this time? And I think a lot of companies looked and said, well, wait a minute, travel managers manage people getting to and from the airport or to a hotel and back home, and we're done. And yet, right, if I'm on your team and I'm hearing everything you said, everything is about huge value and very little about getting our travelers on and off airplanes, right? So Doug Weeks, if you want to start with that, then DeBaltso and Mark, you're going to wrap up. About 2 minutes each on the answer, please. Go for it, Doug.
Yeah, thanks, Albert. I'll try to take less than 2 minutes. I think the value that travel is often focused on in terms of dollars and cents has become quite minimus, right, during this time. So how are we delivering value? It's around finding ways that we're going to protect our people after this crisis is over, and how are we going to make them feel comfortable physically and psychologically. So the human element is really taking precedent and will take precedent for travel people like ourselves moving forward, or be as equally as important as cost and savings are. I think employee welfare and the value we can provide and show through, what we all do with knowing where people are and traveler tracking and business assurance becomes even more at the forefront than does some of the other things. Now, I think in the immediate term, we're providing value through, I think this is also a time for what I've been doing is internal training and education, training on our policies with our admin assistants and our travelers, giving updates on what we're doing. I think it's an opportunity to communicate and promote ourselves and what that value is across the firm. One, people aren't traveling, so they've got more time to attend the sessions that we put in place. So I think there is a huge opportunity in terms of value just through the visibility of the programs that, Albert, like you said, don't often get noticed, right? It's, hey, how are you doing anything when nobody's traveling? The truth is we're probably doing things more valuable now than we were before in terms of, managing individual trips. So, I think there's a huge shift, and one that I think is going to see in terms of employee welfare prioritization.
Yeah, and Doug, that is a home run. And before I come to Mark and then Doug, right, that's huge, right? I just had a takeaway, and we'll sit down in Charleston one day and talk about it, right? So think about our industry. You guys know it well, right? Every 2 years it hopscotched, in the 90s, early 2000s, it sat under a different area of a company, from procurement, shared services, financial services, right? Even treasury, rebates, commissions. And procurement's had a hold on it now for a long time, right? They've taken it and have managed the category, and there were a lot of adjuncts. I think one of the things Doug Weeks is pointing us here to is there's going to be much more interaction now or ownership of HR and the people part of it. And what I took from it, Doug, is, the dollars are important in what it does, but the people are what drive the business objectives. And we got to get our people right to go do that. And that's a huge takeaway for me. Doug DeBaltso, please.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. Certain organizations had, if you go way back, where travel was managed in HR. So does this global crisis start to point travel back into HR over time? That's fascinating. So I borrowed from this question, I guess, in my first 2 answers. And so I won't try not to repeat myself a whole lot. But so what am I doing to add value to the organization going forward? We'll start with that, futures. And I think what we're going to find is that it's sort of interesting. All of our organizations have various video conferencing capabilities, but it was one of these things that it was not field of dreams in the past. We all built these centers out, and we all of us have various policies around using video conferencing and other technology means to do these face-to-face meetings, especially internal meetings. But a lot of times they went underutilized, and and there were issues around that, like you got into a conference room and you couldn't turn the projector on or figure out how to connect everybody, and a bunch of things came together to I think make a lot of these resources really not just show a return on investment. I think that's gonna change dramatically. I was talking to one airline executive the last few days, and he thinks those kinds of meetings and that kind of business travel, if not will go away, will be severely reduced in the future as people say, you know what, is it really necessary for me to meet with a big group of people internally versus this video conferencing? And that's not a new concept for sure, but my point is I think you're going to really see that accelerate. So I've been spending some time now working with our IT group to help build out that potential infrastructure for the future. And the second point I'll go back to, again, I borrowed from this in number one, but and that is just our people still need to function. They're out in the field, they need to buy goods and service and products and so forth. And so our procurement strategy around how they do that, we have loosened up. So if they need to, for instance, run down to, I'm going to make this up, Staples, and our preferred provider is Office Depot, and that would have typically been a no-no in the past, or vice versa. Now we're allowing them more flexibility to do that, to be able to continue to perform their job. So I think that's probably the other key point that I want to make here, is my ability or my desire to help smooth out their ability to procure goods and services for the organization to keep doing their jobs for our customers.
It's a great answer and good real examples. Mark Zuber, if you keep us to 2 minutes, I'll come to you, please.
Excellent. So I would simply summarize this by saying I add currently value on two pillars. The first one is an operational pillar. We still have a major role to play as an enabler of the decision process around this COVID situation and going forward. So it's ensuring that we connect the dots between the different parties and between the industries in order for the system still to work. So the enabler function is absolutely critical. That includes, of course, the risk management part of that. And the second element then is a strategic vision, the strategic role. We have a major role to play right now in building value through insight, providing full insight of what is happening in the industry, how transformation will impact the way we can do business tomorrow, the way we can travel tomorrow. And as a result, also adapt all our strategies, both, from a sourcing, but also from a process and service delivery standpoint. So we're prepared to actually go back, on the road as soon as it is needed, and the way, we want to do it in the most effective way. So it's really the operational focus, but also strategic insight focus. That is the two areas where I think we deliver value right now.
Brilliant. So I'm looking at a couple of questions coming in. Let's see if we get real quick kind of round robin, a question or two out here, right? So a question, I would like to know how these companies are changing things like allowing Airbnb, given that many hotels have canceled, not available, open. Have you opened it up to alternatives? Real quickly, Doug, then Mark. So Weeks first, please.
We have not changed our policy around that. We have not allowed Airbnb. Might it be something we're going to look at potentially, but I think there are still some real risks there, and travelers would want to know that hotels are taking the appropriate cleanliness and safety measures around this versus, an Airbnb host where you don't know necessarily. So I think there's some risks there.
I'm with you. Also, any thoughts?
Yeah. Sorry, but I have to agree with Doug. Ditto. My answer is exactly the same. We've not made any changes for those reasons. That the inventory is tighter, perhaps. However, the ability to vet, the safety of that environment is almost impossible.
Mark, anything different?
I echo the same thing. We keep some flexibility if it's a business critical and then there are options, but the approach is exactly the same as Doug said.
Perfect. Christy, I'm going to watch time, respect, right? You said keep it on time. So let me wrap up with a couple of things, and then Christy, you close us out, right? So first of all, you guys, you hit it, right? So the bar was set high, and I knew that when you guys said, yeah, I'll participate, right? We had an all-star team, and you guys proved us right. You were amazing, right? I thought the group we had 2 weeks ago was off the charts, and we've maintained the momentum here. I thought your insight and different perspectives, and I've got a page of notes here and some takeaways, and I want to bring a couple out that I think require emphasis. So question, will trip approvals remain post-crisis, or is it just an interim solution? Forget about it, right? The industries are unique that way. The visibility of travel is now unlike it's ever been. How do we maintain that? And we're moving beyond just getting people on and off airplanes. I think card and spend expansion is now clearly a viable part of this, right? People are learning to pay with, and the company's learning to support a different set of structure rather than purchase orders and direct payments, etc. Purpose of trip, internal non-revenue. Doug DeBaltz, are we learning really how to now be a virtual for some types of trips? Will it ever come back? And then the last one from Mark, you initiated and Doug Weeks added on in terms of moving from procurement into an HR function, making sure we're giving our people and our assets the opportunity to drive the real mission of the business. And will that lend a more balancing from traditional procurement? So a long way to go to say thanks, right? I can't wait till the 4 of us and the 5 of us are together, and hopefully Mark Zuber makes the offer and we'll find a chance to do it in Switzerland, right? It's one of those amazing places. And again, if he brings you downstairs to his wine cellar, you're right, you found a small spot of heaven on earth, especially as you look over the lake. And I wish you all continued safety, and again, I owe you guys for coming in here and calling in a favor and lending your expertise. You guys were, as I thought, brilliant. I very much appreciate it. Christy, if you would wrap us up, please.
Sure thing. So thanks everyone, and for all of you attending, thanks for joining us today for the second bi-weekly, don't forget, virtual panel. So as you can see on the screen, our next event will be on Wednesday, April 29th at 11 a.m. Check back on our website, the link I had a minute ago, TCG Consulting, and then just /panel. And also check our LinkedIn page for more details and a link to this video in the next coming days. Again, thank you, and we hope each of you has a wonderful rest of your day, and definitely please stay safe and healthy. And thanks again to our panel. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Bye, guys. Thank you very much.
Bye. Thanks. Bye. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.